question is, did the government get the right scientific advice, and then did it implement it or ignore it?
Well, we can only surmise, because the amount of information we've been given to date about what the SAGE committee was giving into government and what the chief scientific advisor and chief medical officer was saying to the Prime Minister, that information is not clear in the public domain yet. However, I would have to say that it's almost unbelievable to me that the science advisory system wouldn't have said, the sooner we go into lockdown, the better. However, let me say one more thing that hasn't so far been mentioned in this debate. It may even be two more things. The first is that the estimate that Professor Neil Ferguson gave yesterday, he actually said more than half. Now, if we were doubling every 3 to 4 days in the disease spreading around the country, that means in a week we would be quadrupling. In other words, it was more than 50% we would have saved. I believe we could have emerged at this point with no more than 10,000 deaths by just going into lockdown a week earlier. That's my first point. My second point is, I think the government position was made clear a few times. Once the Prime Minister made a speech about how we would ride through lockdown while other countries were going into lockdown, our economy would grow and we would emerge like Superman. What he was referring to was a policy of herd immunity. And I do believe that the government was favouring this idea that we should allow the disease to spread, but no more than the National Health Service could manage to cope with the cases until we had herd immunity, which means that 60 to 70% of the population would have had the disease and developed the antibodies.
From what you're saying, because I think that the scientists did know the rate at which the cases were doubling, but from what you're saying, nobody really anticipated how deadly it was going to be, which seems extraordinary when we'd already seen what was happening in Italy.
No, quite. No. I don't believe that. You will remember the Prime Minister himself saying a week before we went into lockdown, but saying as he went into lockdown, you will lose loved ones. You know, be prepared, he was saying. There was an understanding well beforehand. We didn't have to wait, as you've said, Italy, Spain ahead of us. Almost every country in Europe went into this epidemic before us. We had all these examples. We knew exactly what was going to happen.
One of the concerns for the Prime Minister, though, Dave, would undoubtedly have been the economy. He talked about sort of emerging like a superhero off the other side of it. And we're being told today that our economy could well be one of the worst hit globally after this. We have a very strong economy, and we've seen the measures that have been put into place to try and support the economy through this, the furloughed workers, the business support that's been offered.
And we know the health effects that a poor economy can cause.
So they were sort of weighing up those options, weren't they, to pull the trigger on lockdown early and impact the economy sooner, or to try and balance that out. And even leaving it as long as they've done it, it still had a huge impact, and it looks like it's going to sort of continuing impact for years to come.
Absolutely. So here's the important message. The sooner you go into lockdown when an infectious disease epidemic breaks out anywhere in the world, and you know it's going to arrive in Britain because of air travel very quickly, we need to prepare lockdown measures. We need to prepare our hospitals. We need to get the test, trace and isolate policy up and running. We should have got preparing in February. WHO gave very clear advice to governments early in February. And we said, you might remember the Deputy Chief Medical Officer saying in public, when asked, why aren't we following WHO advice? This is much earlier. She said, that advice is for developing countries. Now, who developed that advice? It was the British many years ago. So it just seemed ironic to me. The only way I can understand it is this idea of herd immunity, and we continue to grow our economies. As we stand now, we are likely to be in lockdown for longer than any other country. And so, of course, the damage to our economy today is very bad. But by the time we're out of it, and who knows how long that'll be, it'll be much, much worse. Could I just say, Independent Sage has put forward very clear advice to government. We are saying to government, I know where you are now. We've had all these deaths. Let's leave that behind us. We can do nothing about it. But we're giving advice on the quickest route out of lockdown so that we can return to economic well-being. And the problem is that the test process and trace process the government has put in place is severely underworking. It's not operative at all. We have a wonderful healthcare system. We're not using it. We have GPs. We're not using them. We should have been using the existing healthcare system.
Yeah, I know. But what I think a lot of people will think, you know, you're an independent parallel body, independent Sage, not officially called on by the government. I mean, there are how many scientists on Sage? 70 in all? You'd imagine they've got enough scientific advice, wouldn't you?